Well, what a time to be living, huh? I mean, you just read the paper, watch the news. Things are so unpredictable. And some of us wake up at 3 in the morning and we work our worry beads, don't we? About the future for us, the future for our children, the future for our grandchildren. We wonder and we worry about tomorrow. So now more than ever, we need to be reminded of the strength and the wisdom and the guidance we find in our faith. Now more than ever, we need to claim the hope that comes and the ways in which we are equipped and empowered to be a source of light and hope and blessing to others. Now more than ever, we need to claim that we are an equipped and an empowered people. The Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy says this, "But the Lord stood by me and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed." We are empowered and equipped to make a difference in the world. Do we believe that to be so? Because now more than ever, we need to claim that truth. So where do we begin? Where do we begin? The Apostle Paul, in the letter to the church, the Galatians, says this, that the fruit of the Spirit, that we are empowered by the breath of God, the Ruach of God, the Spirit of God. We are empowered by the Spirit, and the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law that can stand against these, says Paul. There are no headlines in the newspaper, no worries that we carry with us that are greater than the power of God's promise. The fruit of the Spirit, the first three are love, joy, and peace, and today we claim joy. Joy is our promise. Now there's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is based on the root word happenings. If good things happen to us, then we're happy. If our car starts in the morning, we're happy. If our battery is dead in the morning and we're going to work, we are. That's right. So happiness is wonderful. Bobby McFerrin sang that song, "Be Happy," right? It's good to be happy, but happy is circumstantial and it's different than joy. Joy is different. It defies circumstance and occurs in spite of difficult circumstances. Whereas happiness is a feeling, joy is an attitude, it's a posture, it's a stance, it's a way of leaning into the world and believing that the challenges of our time, the worries of our time, will not have the final word. On Thursday evening in this sanctuary, 50 people came together to be trained for how to stand with our immigrant neighbors at risk of deportation. 50 people decided to say that the challenges of our time and an unjust immigration system will not have the final word. We will stand up with and on behalf of our undocumented neighbors. Joy, hope, love has the final word. Do we believe that to be true? Joy is a way of being, a way of leaning into the world that based on the belief that God's will is sovereign and that God's will have the final word. Joy is based on the deep-seated confidence that regardless of what happens, no matter how many challenges come into our lives, no matter how many worries that we have, that God is with us. For as the Apostle Paul says, nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. And the fruit of this belief is joy. Rabbi Abraham Heschel says, just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy. And then he went on to say, and when we believe that, the result is a life of joy. In Psalm 81, we hear these words, "Sing aloud to God our strength, shout for joy to the God of Jacob, raise a song, sound the tambourine," and my favorite phrase, "blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon." When was the last time you howled at the moon? Last year. There you go. So I am in Big Timber, Montana. I am 24 years old, and I am directing my first church youth camp. Spending a year doing an internship in Montana, and I land at Camp Mimmonagish. Mimmonagish by the roaring mountain, deep in the shadow of the mighty river. Sing, Mimmonagish, we belong to you. Hey! So my first camp, I got Mimmonagish, got a bunch of high school kids, and in the evening, I'm ready to go to bed, and one of the counselors comes up. She says, "We're missing 2 cabins, a cabin of boys and a cabin of girls." Now, this is my first rodeo, but I know that that's not good. So the counselors start looking for this cabin of 8 boys, this cabin of 8 girls, and we're going around this camp, and then we hear in the distance, "Ooh!" I know that's not good. That can't be good. "Ooh!" You try that with me? Very nice, very nice. So I know it's not a wolf, although they do have wolves in Big Timber, Montana, and we follow the sound, and sitting in a field are the 8 boys and the 8 girls, and they are looking up at the sky, and there is this full moon. And they are howling at the moon. That, my friends, is joy. That is savoring the moment. That is claiming the moment that we are standing on sacred ground. I don't know if they knew those words to speak, but they felt it. And they couldn't contain their joy. And so they howled at the moon, just like in the Psalms. The Bible reminds us that joy is our response to the assurance that God, the creator of heaven and earth, is always present. This morning's gospel takes place on the evening of Easter. The stories circulate that Jesus has overcome the cross, overcome the violence of the Roman Empire, that his story, his message lives on. And Jesus, that night of Easter, appears before his fearful disciples, for they too are afraid that they will be arrested. They are also afraid that they too will be crucified by Rome. And as the story goes, Jesus appears and breathes Ruach, God's breath, into them and upon them, and he says, "Peace be with you." But he saw their face. He saw how frightened they were. And Jesus asked, "Why are you frightened? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands, look at my feet, that it is me, myself." Then we hear this curious description of the disciples' response in verse 41. While in their joy, they were disbelieving and still wondering. While in their joy, Jesus right in front of them, they were still disbelieving and still wondering. So what is going on? This reminds us that joy is a fruit of the Spirit. God's breath, God's presence resting upon the disciples then and upon us today. It comes with knowing that we are loved and cherished. But this passage, this verse, also reminds us that we're human, that our faith is often fragile, that even in the midst of our faith, our joy, we still struggle to believe, we still struggle to hold on to hope, we still work our worry beads at 3 a.m, don't we? But yet we are called in the midst of our own frailty of faith and in the midst of the struggles of our own time, we are called to claim the joy that comes in opening ourselves to God's presence and God's Spirit. This is to say that joy is a choice, to have hope even when despair is at the door, to be courageous even when we are afraid, to forgive even when we are hurting, and to love even when we don't think we have a deeper reservoir to draw upon. Joy is a stance, a way of being and living in the world that is based on the belief that even in the midst of our uncertainties and our worries, that God is still at work with us and through us. Do we believe that to be true? A reminder of God's presence during good times and hard times. Tim Hansel, who lives with chronic pain, wrote these words: "Pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. We cannot avoid pain," he writes, "but we can avoid joy. God has given us such immense freedom that God allows us to be as miserable or as joyful as we want to be." Do you ever meet people who are just committed to being miserable? You know, it's always the glass is half empty. But it's a choice. It's a choice to be joyful. It's a choice, it's a stance to believe that God is still at work in the midst of all of the trying times that we may live in. Joy is simple, which is not to be confused with easy. At any moment in life, we have at least two options. One of them is to choose an attitude of gratitude, a posture of grace, a commitment to joy, or not to. It's a choice that rests with us. Joy is both a gift of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit, but it also requires our choosing to receive it and to share it. Have you ever known a person who has chosen to be joyful? Have you ever known someone who, in the midst of the struggles that they're dealing with, has chosen to have a stance of gratitude and thanksgiving? Last week, several of us gathered in this sanctuary to remember the life of Norman Whitehead. Norman died at 79 years of age. For those who are newer to the church, say in the last 15 years, you probably never met Norman. He had been living at Essex Park Nursing Home for the last 15 years. Diabetes had ravaged his body, he had lost limbs. He struggled with his health. But to visit Norman was to be blessed. I always said, I know Marty Lincoln, who visited Norman many times, said, we always left feeling better after having been with Norman. Marty refers to Norman as the mayor of Essex Park. He knew all the staff. He knew the names of their children. He asked about their health. He asked about when a baby was born or a grandchild was born. Norman was a part of people's lives. He had so much to despair of. He had so much misery that had been visited upon him. He had so much pain that he lived with every day. But there's something within Norman where he made a choice. My guess is he made a choice every day, perhaps several times a day, to be joyful. He was a man of deep faith who knew that he was cherished by God, that he was God's beloved, and he wanted other people to know that too, just by how he lived his life. A few days before he died, Marty took Norman, wheeled him in his chair over to see another friend of Marty's, this man was 20 years younger, who's also lost limbs to diabetes. And she knew that Norman would encourage this other younger man. And he did. What an extraordinary way of living, an extraordinary way of being in the world, to live a life of joy, a fruit of the Spirit of God at work in each one of us. Joy is both a gift and a choice. In our uncertain times, more now than ever, we need to be reminded that we are loved, that we are cherished, that we are known by name, and that we have the gift of the Spirit at work in us, the gift of joy. The first three gifts, says the Apostle Paul, are love, joy, and peace. Someone once remarked that it is joy that empowers us to love more deeply, and joy that graces us with peace. We live in challenging times, uncertain times, worrisome times. But we are graced with the presence of the one true God that believes in us, cherishes us, and calls us by name. This is the good news. Thanks be to God. And may God's people say,